Are you ready to look at the highs and lows of one of the most popular hip-hop artists of all time? Because today, we are ranking every Drake album from worst to best. Now, when we look at Drake, he is a rapper that is really unlike any other artist that we have ever seen before. Despite every single record he releases being a major commercial success, Drake is actually one of the most polarizing musicians in all of the world today, with some of his albums being considered modern classics, while others are scrutinized for being pretty blatant cash grabs. Now, as Drake just dropped his latest album, For All the Dogs, it's the perfect time to look back, not just on his solo albums, but also his collab records and mixtapes, and rank everything to find out how good Drake's discography truly is. Now, if you're ready to find out if Drake is as good as the numbers say, or if he's actually a fraud, let's waste no time and let's get right into it.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit that I have ever heard.
Coming in all the way at the bottom, at the wretched last place, at number 16, we got Honestly Nevermind, which, despite being one of Drake's more creative endeavors, is just terrible. Drake's experiment into house and dance music just fundamentally doesn't work because Drake phones in almost every aspect of what makes these genres fun and exciting in the first place. The whiny vocals Drake brings to the table here are about as energetic as a senior citizen, and the production lacks any sort of command over the project, which makes this thing truly embarrassing. There is no other way around it. The only song that kinda works in this capacity is Sticky, which manages to show how Drake's own musical prowess could have contributed to something special, but besides this, the best part of the album is the outro track, Jimmy Cooks, which is a full-blown rap song, with the only genuine good part about this project being from a whole other genre than the rest of it. That really tells you just how much of a failure Honestly Nevermind is. So all in all, for this album being a complete and utter musical disaster, for it being one of the most embarrassing efforts I have ever seen from an artist of this stature, it is in last place on this list. Coming in at number 15, we got Drake's most recent album, For All the Dogs, and I know some people may be mad at this one, but Fat D is not just one of Drake's worst albums, but it's without a doubt his most uninspired, and it suffers for this reason. For an album that was hyped up to resurrect the old Drake that everybody misses, Drake came with the most lackluster material possible, delivering performances that felt like they were bordering on self-parody half the time. While there were a few scattered gems throughout the album, like First Person Shooter with J. Cole, which was awesome, and 8 AM in Charlotte, which contained some of Drake's best rapping in years, majority of the songs here feature Drake at his most intolerable, with this childish writing, which for someone who's almost 37 years old, it is just baffling how juvenile the tone of his music has gotten, and making things even worse, the album is almost an hour and 30 minutes long, so it gets pretty torturous sitting through filler track after filler track. Now, while other Drake albums we will talk about later also suffer from being just way too long, at least you'll find some good bangers and maybe even some shocking deep cuts on them, but on For All the Dogs, there is almost none of this. You just hear Drake drawing out his whiny vocals over lifeless beat after lifeless beat, and for this album ultimately leaving me with really nothing good to say. For All the Dogs is right near the bottom of this list, and I got a feeling it's gonna age like milk. Now, coming in at number 14, we got Drake's first ever mixtape with 2006's Room for Improvement, and while this project is pretty bad looking back on it, it is not here whatsoever for the same reasons as the past few albums were. Now, the one thing that Room for Improvement really has driving it forward is the energy and hunger that's on display from Drake. From very early on, Drake rose above a lot of other artists simply because you can hear just how much he wants to be great, but with this said, at this point in his career, he did not figure out how to hone this skill and how to use this drive to make himself stand out as a truly special talent, because the way Drake raps on this album just feels like he is plagiarizing the styles of his biggest influences. If you ever needed proof that Pusha T was one of Drake's favorite rappers growing up, look no further than this record, because just listening to it for a few seconds, you will hear how Drake is mimicking the cadence and intricacies of Push's signature style, along with other popular MCs at the time like Lupe Fiasco and Fonte. It is really weird going back to this record and seeing stylistically just how different Drake was, because in all honesty, you can't even tell that it's him. From his voice to the way he is structuring rhymes, it all feels so different than what we would see see from Drake anytime in the future after this. Now, while it's interesting to see where Drake came from, that's the only reason why this mixtape is even remembered. If this wasn't associated with the Drake brand, this would be just another generic mixtape that got lost to time, and for this reason, it's at the number 14 spot on this list. Now, coming in at number 13, we got Drake's B-side collection, Dark Lane demo tapes, and while this project has some really great tracks like When to Say When and Chicago Freestyle, most of what Drake gave us here is so forgettable. Now, in hip-hop, it's interesting because we have seen a lot of rappers release collections of tracks that they never intended to put out to the public, and it's always interesting to see how they fare out. From rappers like Nas with the Lost Tapes and Kendrick Lamar with Untitled Unmastered, we have seen actual cult classic records formulate from what was almost considered throwaway material, and when it comes to Drake's swing in this ring, he did not make anything remotely close to this at all. While I don't go into a record like this expecting the same cohesion and calculation from an album, I would at least hope that we get some interesting tracks from Drake, and with the core of this record either featuring cringe TikTok bait dance songs like 2C Slide or extremely disappointing collabs like Pain 1993 with Playboi Carti, which I am still not over how bad that was. There was nothing to grasp onto with this project, it really just came and went. So overall, for Dark Lane demo tapes being at the epitome of Drake's most forgettable projects, with so many lackluster songs and only a few good ones, it is near the very bottom of this list. Coming in at number 12, we are still looking at bad albums, but things are starting to get a little better with Certified Lover Boy. Now, while CLB is one of Drake's more successful albums commercially, this record represents everything wrong with the modern era of his music. From the filler songs to the artificially engineered hits that are shoved down our throats, there are so many moments on this album that come from the most disingenuous place, with their only purpose being to boost streams and to inflate dollars. And the most frustrating thing about CLB is that beyond all of its flaws, there could have been a really good project with a lot to be enjoyed. From bangers like Fair Trade and Knife Talk to gems like Champagne Poetry and TSU, there were so many highlights on this record that captured the best of what Drake can be. Most of the collaborations on this album were also amazing, with guests like 21 Savage, Jay-Z, Project Pat, and many others delivering jaw-dropping performances. So in all honesty, it's a shame that all of this strong material is surrounded by so much filler garbage. Drake really laid the groundwork for something special on this album and decided to muck it all up in the spirit of chasing dollars and attention. So when we look at the legacy of CLB, I think this record captured best the frustrating relationship people like myself have with modern Drake music. On one hand, there are a lot of great songs here that I still come back to. There is a lot to appreciate, but for every track that's as exciting as Fair Trade or as passionate as No Friends in the Industry, you got something as contrived as Way Too Sexy or as corny as Girls Like Girls, and this is why the album is all the way down at 12th place. And coming in at number 11, right outside the top 10, we got Scorpion, which, very similar to CLB, is an album with incredible highs, but also incredible lows. Now, clocking in at an hour and 30 minutes with 25 songs, Scorpion is another Drake album that was stuffed to the brim with material, but it just fails to justify its length, with so many songs that are either boring, annoying, cringeworthy, or just a pure and utter musical failure with tracks like Ratchet Happy Birthday. Now, while Scorpion has more filler and lower lows than an album like CLB, the reason I have it higher is because its peak moments are some of Drake's best in the modern era of his career. Tracks like 8 out of 10 and Sandra's Rose are not just some of the most passionate and inspired Drake tracks released in recent memory, but are really some of the most elaborate and well thought out of his entire career, and hits like God's Plan and Nice for What remain as some of the best Drake bangers to this very day. With tracks showing off the best of Drake both as a hitmaker and a lyricist, Scorpion really could have been something amazing, but the album is just bogged down with filler, especially in the second half, which features Drake dipping heavily into his melodic side, and it just does not work. Drake is not a bad singer, but his melodic capabilities are only charming when they are complementing his rapping or coming up in small doses. When you hear this guy singing for 13 tracks straight over the most gloomy and tired production, it's impossible to even pretend that this is good. If you were to trim down Scorpion from 25 songs to about 10 to 12, it would seriously be in the running for one of Drake's best albums, but as it stands, it's another mediocre effort that suffers from having an inconsistent quality gap from track to track. Now, cracking the top 10, we got Views, and out of every single Drake album, this is the one I have the most complicated relationship with this project being the transition point from what people consider the old and new Drake. There are some people that think this album is nearly as good as its predecessors, and others who despise Drake's attempt at really pushing into the pop scene. And when it comes to how I feel about this project, while I think it's definitely a level up in terms of quality from the last albums we looked at, Views just does not work for me as a complete full-fledged experience. With Drake designing this album to be more radio friendly than his previous works, a lot of the songs just feel so plain and unadventurous. And even when Drake is rapping, outside of a few highlights like the self-titled track and Child's Play, it feels like he is pulling his punches and playing everything so safe, and it makes this project feel really dull at its core. Another issue I have with Views is that it feels like two completely different records that were jumbled together, and it just makes all aspects of this album even more of a mess. With darker and amped up cuts like Hype and Pop Style, it sounds like Drake is trying to make a spiritual successor to If You're Reading This It's Too Late at times, and then you have tracks like Controlla and One Dance where he is making dancehall and pop music, and with these styles being so different yet sequenced together so haphazardly, it just hurts the entire experience. So overall, while Views does have its redeeming qualities and has a ton of songs that are enjoyable to this day, when you look at it as a complete album from top to bottom, it has not aged the best. Now coming in at number 9, we have Drake's second mixtape, Comeback Season, and this is really the project where you started to see just how much potential Drake really had. From the presentation to his performance, Drake asserted his place in hip-hop's future at the time, starting to really showcase his signature wit and charm, and looking back on this record all these years later, it's a lot of fun to hear Drake rap like the rent is due. The raw tenacity in his voice is something that you just don't hear anymore from him, so it's so exciting to see him bring this energy and bravado to a project. Where all Drake projects after this place such a heavy focus on melodies and creating an overall grander cinematic feel for a project, it's so interesting going back to a version of Drake where he was only focused on spitting the best bars he possibly could over much rawer production than he would ever use today. While some of the beat choices definitely have not aged the best looking back on it, the sheer hunger and passion shown by Drake more than makes up for it, and if you have not checked out this mixtape, go find it on YouTube and give it a listen, because I am sure it will give you a newfound appreciation for Drake. Coming in at number 8, we got Drake's debut album, Thank Me Later. Now, when we look back on the early part of Drake's career, while people love praising his breakout mixtape So Far Gone and his sophomore album Take Care, nobody really ever talks about Thank Me Later, and while it's not on the same level of the projects that came before or after it, it's definitely a solid record that showcases a lot of what would make Drake a superstar in the years following it. While a decent portion of this album does feel very dated, there are so many classic cuts on this record that are in the Hall of Fame of Drake tracks. Fancy with T.I. and Swizz Beatz is still one of the better Drake songs to ever touch our ears, and who does not love classics like Over and Find Your Love? Listening back to this record, there is a lot of gems from some of Drake's most introspective tracks ever, like The Resistance, to some of his earliest collabs with titans like Jay-Z and Lil Wayne. This album really feels like it laid out the blueprint that Drake would use to dominate the music world for years to come. Overall, while Thank Me Later doesn't feel as complete as So Far Gone or as poignant as Take Care, it's a super solid chapter in Drake's career that I would even say has become his most underrated these days, and for these reasons, it's at the number 8 spot on this list. Coming in at number 7, we got Drake's Playlist. Yeah, you heard that right, Playlist More Life, which if you remember when this thing dropped, Drake called it a playlist, not an album, which was probably an excuse to justify its lack of cohesion, but in all honesty, the loose structure of this record really worked in its favor, functioning more like a highlight reel of Drake music as opposed to a cohesive experience. Like all modern Drake records, More Life still suffers from the problem of being a little too long, but even with 22 tracks, this is easily the most consistent Drake record out of all of his modern solo projects. More Life is one of the most fun and exciting records in all of Drake's catalog because of how it keeps you on your feet. It manages to encompass so many different styles and versions of Drake while remaining cohesive enough to never give that tonal whiplash that records like Scorpion and For All the Dogs suffer from. Just in Drake's performances themselves, he sounds so much more passionate and excited about what he is doing here than on other albums released around this time, and it only adds to the thrill of the experience. There are so many bangers on More Life that all differ in what they offer, yet are also rich in their own regard. From something super chill and vibey like Passion Fruit to intense cutthroat rapping on Free Smoke, Drake really shows just how versatile he is on this project. Another aspect that really enriches this record are the features, which add so much texture and vibrance to this project. From Kanye West and Young Thug to Georgia Smith and Sampha, All of the guests breathe so much life into this album, and this is easily the best use of features on any Drake record, maybe besides Take Care, because beyond the brand value superstars like Travis Scott and Quavo bring with their namesake, their talent was used to truly enrich what we were hearing. So overall, for being the ultimate highlight reel of Drake's skills and easily his most inspired work in the modern era of his career, More Life has taken the number 7 spot on this list. And right outside the top 5 at number 6, we got Drake's collab album with 21 Savage, Her Loss, which out of all of the recent Drake projects, especially in the past few years, this record is a real outlier because it's actually good for a change. This album had no filler, no gimmicks, and as a result, it thrived from being such a focused effort. From start to finish, Drake and 21 Savage ensued sheer chaos on listeners as they delivered some of the most charged up performances of their respective careers. Now, while this is a collab album, 21 Savage plays a minor role compared to Drake as he doesn't even appear on a handful of songs, and while some were disappointed by 21 having only a little over 30% of the vocals on this project, it allowed for Drake to go absolutely insane. Never in Drake's entire career has he delivered a more chaotic performance, as he just gets super toxic on this album. From throwing shots at anybody and everybody, from Kanye West to Megan Thee Stallion to Serena Williams' husband, to just flexing on his competition, hearing Drake with so much urgency and fire under him makes for an absolute thrill of a ride. The way Drake used his pettiness to fuel his verses on this album breathed a sense of life into Her Loss that most other modern Drake albums don't have, and while it's kind of pathetic for a 36-year-old man to be acting the way he is here, it's still a blast to listen to nonetheless. Another aspect that makes Her Loss so special is that Drake is actually focusing on rapping for once. In an era where Drake has been turning further and further away from the roots of what made him successful, it was so refreshing to hear Drake really going all out in the bars department, and for all of these reasons, for creating one of the most chaotic and hectic albums in modern hip-hop, Her Loss has taken the number 6 spot on this list. In the top 5, we got Drake's collab album with Future, What a Time to Be Alive, and when it comes to this project, a lot of what I said about Her Loss applies to the success of this record, but I got this album a little bit higher up because it overall offers a more complete package. Drake and Future were in the very prime of their careers. Anytime these two stepped in the booth, they did not miss, and having these two titans come together for an entire collaborative effort was a match made in hip-hop heaven. What a Time to Be Alive serves as the ultimate victory lap for two of the biggest rappers of our generation, and the chemistry Drake and Future had was just next level. The way this duo was able to play off of each other's strengths and create decade-defining bangers is something that we really haven't seen many combos replicate to this day, and with the grandiose production from names like Metro Boomin and Southside, the album's score perfectly matched the braggadocious feel that Drake and Future brought to life. With there not being a single bad track on this album, it is without a doubt one of the best collab albums in modern hip-hop, and it is one of the best albums Drake has ever released to this day. Cracking the Mount Rushmore of Drake projects, we got his 2009 mixtape So Far Gone, and despite being almost 15 years old, this record is still one of his best. Now, while Comeback Season asserted Drake as an artist with some serious potential, So Far Gone actualized the skills Drake had as he really emerged as an artist who can take the torch forward into the next chapter of hip-hop history. From rapping to singing, Drake showed that he offers the complete package and used these skills to create a mixtape that, between its presentation and its atmosphere, was like nothing else rap had seen ever before to this point. Drake didn't just showcase his talent on this project, but also displayed his greatest trait in the early part of his career, which was his relatability. He didn't have a crazy backstory, but was just being honest about his hopes and dreams, and this didn't just solidify the image Drake would build his career from, but it allowed for people to easily identify with this project most importantly. Even things like Drake rapping over Kanye's Say You Will instrumental on Say What's Real, or Lil Wayne dropping off not one, not two, not three, but 4 entire verses just enriched this experience and showed the type of mantle Drake was reaching for. So with So Far Gone changing the status quo for Drake's career, the modern mixtape, and ultimately hip-hop as a whole with what it set up, it is to this day one of Drake's best records. Cracking the top 3, we are really in elite territory with true classic albums, and in this spot, we got Drake's 2015 effort, If You're Reading This, It Is Too Late, and this is a record that isn't just one of a kind in Drake's catalog, but in hip-hop as a whole. To this day, what makes this record so special is the darker, more intense version of Drake that it gave us. On this surprise release, Drake just championed a deviant energy that added a sense of pressure and urgency to this entire record, and has only made every single second of it more more exciting and more unpredictable. For the only time in his career since he's been a major player in hip-hop, Drake raps like the landlord is knocking on his door for the entire record, and this is just such a surreal experience for that reason. From the intense cutthroat rapping Drake brings to the table to the thrilling production, which is filled with some of the most intricate and unique sampling techniques and climactic and iconic beat switches, what If You're Reading This It's Too Late pulled off is just next level. This record isn't just filled with some of Drake's most memorable tracks like Know Yourself and Legend, but these are also some of his most elaborate cuts that he has ever put together in terms of the way he builds and relieves tension, by the way he switches up between rapping and singing, bouncing between vocal pockets, and even through the production, which has some of the best beat switches in hip-hop history. While I don't think this is Drake's best project, I do think If You're Reading This It's Too Late represents the very peak of Drake's skills as an artist. From his rapping to understanding how to set the overall tone and mood of a project, Drake was in another dimension here, and for these reasons, If You're Reading This Is Too Late is taking the number 3 spot. And coming in at number 2, the runner-up to the best Drake album, we got Take Care, and what do I really have to say about this project that hasn't been said already? From start to finish, Take Care is a legendary album that doesn't just deliver every single thing somebody could want from a Drake album, but does it at a level of near mastery. From energetic bangers to mellow heartbreak anthems, Take Care captures the full spectrum of what gave Drake universal appeal in the first place, and it just ran with it. Drake does not waste a second of this album's running time and fleshes it out to be one of the most dynamic experiences in the genre's history. The way Drake can drop one of the most memorable bangers of the 2010s in headlines and then one track later go on a tense emotional reflection with Crew Love is something almost no other artist can do, and with each track on this record immersing you into their own world, you are able to feel both the immense highs and the crippling lows in the picture Drake is painting us. Another aspect that expands Take Care's scope into something even greater is the usage of features. Rihanna, The Weeknd, Kendrick Lamar, Nicki Minaj, Lil Wayne, Andre 3000, Stevie Wonder, Rick Ross, and more all deliver peak features, and this just makes the album even more powerful. The way something like the emotional centerpiece of this album, Marvin's Room, flows right into Kendrick Lamar's Buried Alive interlude creates this emotional ripple, this void right in you, the listener's heart, that most albums couldn't even reach to on their best day. It's really a sentiment to Drake's artistry for all he was able to weave into this album, as it really encompasses all you could ever want from a piece of music, and for all of these reasons, Take Care is the second best Drake album. And coming in at number 1, the moment you have all been waiting for, Drake's best album. And before I say it, I want you to go and smash that like button and hit subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and it is free to do. Now with that out of the way, Drake's best album, the ultimate Drake album, is Nothing Was the Same. Now with 13 songs that play out over the course of an hour, Nothing Was the Same is a one-of-a-kind experience that, beyond just embodying what makes Drake one of the defining artists of our generation, does it in the most poignant and profound way possible. Nothing Was the Same is an album that focuses on the concept of success. Serving as Drake's first album after solidifying himself as the Grammy-winning, arena-touring, chart-topping superstar that we know him as today, this project gave us a glimpse into where he was at when his life was changing forever, and while many artists use this pivotal point in their career to make more music that's merely flexing on the listener and treading on all of the same old nothing to something stories, Drake does the exact opposite. Now don't get me wrong, Drake still focuses on where success has taken him with tracks like Started From the Bottom, but Nothing Was the Same at its core represents so much more than the mere sensation of fame and explores the full spectrum of what success has done to Drake. Through cuts that highlight the best of his rapping, singing, and storytelling, Drake immerses us within the world he is living in by cherishing every second as he expands on this concept further and further. Drake explores his come-up, his worries about loneliness and never-ending quest for love, his inner battles between hubris and humility, and through all of these explorations, he builds this living, breathing world that feels so powerful and real, and most importantly, comes from a place where we can understand it all. The way Drake narrates the ever-shifting state of his life shows us, the listener, just how fast your life can end up changing, and what Drake ends up telling us about this album is that nothing will ever be sacred except for the one thing that you can control, and that is the person who you are deep down inside. While I don't know if these days Drake still has the same type of humble pride he said he would always have here, but the sentiment sentiment is still the most powerful theme you could find in his catalog regardless. So between the mastery of his skills, giving us so many classic tracks, from the perfect intro in Tuscan Leather to the perfect closer in Pound Cake Paris Morton music with Jay-Z, Nothing Was the Same is not just the best Drake album, but it's also the perfect one. When we look back at Drake's legacy decades from now, this will be the album that will stand above the rest as the defining statement of his career. So there you have it. All 16 Drake albums, mixtapes, collab projects, and his one weird playlist thing all ranked in one list. And after looking at Drake's extensive catalog, you can see that while the quality of his music has generally declined over the years, for every bad and mid album he's dropped, there is a classic in there as well. While today it's frustrating being a Drake fan, seeing him not put anywhere near the same level of effort and care into his new albums, at least for every time we get disappointed by something like For All the Dogs, we will always have albums like Nothing Was the Same and Take Care to Cherish for the rest of time. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about my ranking and what are your top 3 Drake projects? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton and it is free to do. Thank you for watching. Your support means everything. Mr. F, Fantastic Hip Hop, signing out. Catch you in the next video.